And we weren't fact-checking him because he was telling us not to. Hello, my name is Charity Wottrich, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be doing part 4 of my I Grew Up in a Cult series, and today is the exciting how I escaped from the cult, how I figured out it was a cult, how I got out. So super pumped for that. It's my favorite part of the story. Well, one of my favorite parts of the story for sure, because, you know, hello, getting out of it. That was awesome. And so, yeah, let's dive into that. I wanted to address the elephant in the room. It's been about a month-ish since I posted a video, and I said at the beginning of this that this would be every week, so it's definitely not been every week. For one thing, I didn't anticipate that the I Grew Up in a Cult series would be so emotionally draining to film and edit. In addition to that, my husband and I are going through some personal stuff right now, so just give me some grace as I stagger the videos a little bit more than I thought I would be doing initially, and hopefully we can get back on track soon enough to be posting every week. But in the meantime, give ya gal some grace, please. With that, let's go back into the story. Let me just say at the beginning of this, I think that it was totally the Holy Spirit that worked in my heart to be able to mold it to the point where I was even open to the idea that Branhamism could be false, or the message as I called it at the time. So yeah, all the glory be to God for me actually getting out of the cult, because I was so brainwashed up until like the end, really. It was really a succession of events that were orchestrated in a beautiful way that I couldn't have written myself, that led my heart to be open to the truth. Having a conversation with one of my sisters, and I was in her room and we were talking, and she was telling me about something she was going through, and I expressed, well, I know how you feel. I feel this emptiness inside. And she was like, you feel emptiness inside? Like, she was so surprised because I was so happy-go-lucky. And also, like, I was surprised myself because I said, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. I'm reading my Bible like every day, King James Version, of course. I'm reading my Bible every day. I'm looking at Message Believer tapes. I'm like taking notes in church. I'm like, I'm totally involved in the service, and yet I feel like so empty and so sad. And what I was describing was depression. I didn't know it at the time, but in hindsight, I can see that I was going through the motions and feeling depressed, and my sister had to go to an appointment, so I was just left there with this realization where I hadn't said it out loud before, so me saying it to her was and really the thing that made me take it to God in prayer, because before that I don't think I even realized that I was depressed. So I began to pray to God, and I found myself pleading with God, saying, God, I'm doing all these things for you, and I feel like you're not present in my life. And I remember trying to think of something more that I could do to make God present in my life. Not really how it works, but that's what I was trying to do, kind of thinking of my Isaac, if you will, something that was so big that I could give up, or that I could do, that could show God how much I trusted him and how much I wanted him in my life. And I was trying to think of what the hardest thing for me to do would be. And I remember saying things like I could read my Bible even more. And at this point I was going through a Bible and reading plan in a year, and I was I mean, I was reading a lot at that point. And so I was saying, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could pray more. You know, my prayer life hasn't been strong. Maybe I could pray more. Maybe I could read more message books. What do you want me to do, God, so that you will be present in my life? I'll do anything. And it just popped in my head that the hardest thing for me to do, my Isaac, as it were, would be if my whole system of beliefs were wrong. Because I really felt a sense of belonging in the message. And I hesitated to even say it out loud because doubting was considered a sin. So even in my private prayer to God, I hesitated to even suggest that I would think of that. So I said, "Dear God, even if the message is wrong," and I know the message isn't wrong. I know, I don't think it is, but if it was, I'm just saying that's how much I want you in my life. I would leave my whole system of beliefs to have you in my life. Like, even if it was wrong, which I know it's not. I'm just telling you that's how far I would go for you. And I had so many wrong presuppositions in that because I was assuming that my works equals a better relationship with God, and that is not true. It's God pursuing you and God loving you and God choosing you, not the other way around. So just a little tangent there. That's not the way it works. But I prayed that because I was so desperate and I was feeling depressed. And I remember feeling like God heard my prayer for the first time in a while. There was only a few prayers that I really felt like God heard me while I was in the message, and that was one of the ones I really felt like a connection there. I really felt like God heard what I said, and I didn't have an answer. It was just like a peace. And so fast forward, there was a church service. I think it was a Wednesday night. And somewhere in there, they said towards the end that if you have any doubt, come to the altar and confess that to God. And I had been feeling kind of guilty for the prayer that I'd prayed to God, even though it was me just pouring my heart out to God, being honest, you know, the way that his disciples would be all the time, asking him questions and asking him things that they didn't understand. So even though I didn't do anything wrong there, I was feeling guilty. And so I went up to the altar to repent of the doubt that I had felt, even for a second, that vocalizing to God that even if the message was wrong, I would leave it for you. And then afterwards, I remember somebody coming up to me and saying, I'm so proud of you for going up to the altar and making things right with God, or they said something like that. And I remember feeling so dirty, for lack of a better word. Like, I realized in that moment, I shouldn't have gone up to the altar for having an honest conversation with God. I was asking God to be more present in my life, and I was being honest with God. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with sharing my thoughts with God. Even if my thoughts had some doubt, it intermingled in a strange sort of way. I just felt so dirty, and I was like, no, I shouldn't have gone up there. I'm not proud of me going up to the altar and confessing that sin, as it were. So it was a few weeks after that I walked into this conversation where my brother was talking to my mom, and he stopped abruptly when I walked into the room. It was late at night. I had just came down for a glass of water or something, and I was like, what's going on? And he was hesitant, but after some prompting, he said, well, I was just expressing how I don't think that William Branham is a prophet. And it was like in that moment when he said that, it was like God was telling me, this is the answer to the prayer. This is the answer to your prayer. And I was just, I think, a little in shock, and I was like hesitant, but I just remember saying something to the effect of, explain, tell me more. Why do you say that? Or something to that effect. And so that evening, my brother showed me all this research that he had done that basically painted William Branham as not just a false prophet because of prophecies that didn't come to pass, but also as a liar, either a liar or a madman, because he had told multiple stories different ways. One example is the man from Windsor. He told the story with drastically different endings. So in one story, this man, the man from Windsor, came up and he was very cynical of William Branham. He had a false prayer card saying that he was sick, and really he was just coming up to see if William Branham really could discern that he was trying to trick him, And so the story goes that William Branham, as he retold it, was that he did know that he was trying to trick him, and he called him out. So just a little more context there for y'all who aren't familiar with that part of the story. So as I was saying, it had different endings. One, he was forgiven when he begged for mercy. And another time he got the illness that was on his prayer card. And another one, it was like, one, he died on the spot and they had to carry him out. And another, he died 6 months later. And these are the man from Windsor. And I remember seeing those stories, and like, I remembered as a child, I remembered hearing that story in Sunday school a couple different times. And one time I remember, I know this end of that story. And then the leader of Sunday school, the lady who, Sunday school teacher, finished the story, and I was like, that's not how I remembered it. I guess I'm wrong. I mean, I don't know, and just put it out of my mind. And so as I was doing this research with my brother, I was like, wait a second. No, I totally remembered that story correctly when I was a kid in Sunday school from the first time they told it. And then a second time they told it, it was told differently because there are multiple accounts of the story of the man from Windsor that are drastically different. I guess I totally dismissed it because of cognitive dissonance, where you are believing two different things at the same time, and you're trying to reconcile those. Like, I guess my memory was actually great, and I was just brainwashed. And so that was one of the things. And then there were all these prophecies that hadn't actually come to pass the way that Branham had said that they came to pass, or he had spitballed a bunch of prophecies, and some of them he wouldn't bring up again if they didn't happen, or he would twist the way that it came to pass and saying it came to pass when it didn't, and say things like, you can see it in the newspapers all across the United States and Canada, things like that. And as we were looking at these archives and cross-referencing and looking at newspaper records, all these things, for one thing, these prophecies that he made, they weren't reported in newspapers, even though he said they were. And also, the outcomes weren't the same as the original prophecy, and he'd say, I prophesied this back then, and it was different, and I remember saying, like, this doesn't make sense. Like, if the evidence is right here, and the prophecies don't line up, how come I didn't know this before? How come I didn't see it before? And it's obvious. We had one source of information, so we weren't checking. We weren't going back and cross-referencing passages. We were just taking it for granted from the teachers from the pulpit and from the quotes in front of us. When we heard a quote of William Branham saying, 10 years ago, I prophesied that this thing would happen, and now here it's happening, we would say, wow, he prophesied and this happened. And likewise, when he would have a prophecy and then say, this happened, we wouldn't go back in time in the archives of the newspapers to actually confirm that those things happened that he said happened. So of course we thought that it was right because we only had one source of information. We had one guy lying to us, or lying to the people of his day, and we were, letting his legacy live on through the archives of his, and we weren't fact-checking him because he was telling us not to. You get how that works? That's why I think that one source of information, if a church is telling you, hey, you can't be looking at the news, you absolutely can't be reading stuff about other doctrines, you absolutely can't be researching this group online. Oh, ding ding, red flags. Those are red flags. I'm just saying that because even as I'm recounting it, I'm like shocked again that I didn't see that stuff before. And of course, I say that, but I know why. I was brainwashed. And when people tell me, or when people ask, how could you be a part of something that was so clearly wrong? Y'all, it was a cult. The information was controlled, fear tactics were used, people were being brainwashed. So of course I was a part of it. It's a cult. It's a miracle that I got out of it, honestly. There's a sense of belonging and a sense that you are somebody special. And yes, there's all these other things that are totally wrong, but it's kind of similar to if you ever had a friend who was in an abusive relationship and they felt like they couldn't get out or they didn't want to get out. Cult is kind of like an abusive relationship, but for religions. Whew, I need to calm down. I'm getting really excited. Like I said, this is probably my favorite part of the story, if not my second favorite for sure, because I escaped. Hold on. I was on one side of a brick wall and then suddenly I'm on the other side. Like, that's the way that it felt. Immediately I was realizing that we were being lied to, that we had been being lied to, and it was just a matter from there, like untangling. So what was a lie? Like, is this a lie? Was that a lie? Is this true? What is real? Like, kind of trying to sort it out. And I remember there was a service soon after that. My brother had talked to our head pastor at the time, who had been replaced Joseph Coleman. He wasn't considered an apostle or anything. So yeah, from my other videos, Joseph Coleman considered himself an apostle, and then he passed away in 2012. And so here we are in, I guess this is 2014 now, and there's this new pastor. This is the time that I was figuring out that this was a cult. So when I was about 16 was when I was figuring this out. So my brother approached the pastor at the time, and he was the head pastor between New York and Pennsylvania churches in the sect of Branhamism that I was a part of called the Thunders. So he talked to the pastor and shared with him his concerns. They had said, if you ever have questions or doubts, you can bring them to us and we'll answer your questions. Because after Brother Coleman died, the church had some splits, and there was a lot of strife in the church. So we were told that if you have questions, you should ask. And so my brother took his concerns to the pastor, naming specific things, just a few of the specific things that he'd done research on and were concerning to him. One was, I believe, the municipal bridge dream that William Branham had, the dream and prophecy, really, and how it didn't actually come to pass. And we were taught that it was. And I think he also brought up the cloud of mystery, the ring of mystery that had supposedly vindicated Branham's prophecy. And he brought up how that cloud that was supposed to be a sign of that vindicating Branham who he says he was, because he saw this cloud, this ring of mystery was above him at this certain time when he was receiving a vision, and then the cloud was reported in Life magazine, and the pictures were like, this is too high to be an actual cloud, this is so mysterious. And so anyway, he used that to vindicate his message, and I'm not quite sure what the other thing was that he brought up, but something else as well. And so he took these things to him, and he, according to my brother, he responded with, oh, thank you so much. Like, I'll look into these things. I'll get back to you. I appreciate you bringing these things to me. Thank you. And then the following Wednesday night, we had a live service, which was very rare. Usually Wednesday nights were reserved for replaying a Branham tape or a Coleman tape, but this Wednesday night was a live service, and it was in Pennsylvania. It was usually live. When it was live, it was usually live in New York. But the head pastor was preaching live, and he proceeded to bash my brother from the pulpit. So basically, he told my brother that he would look into everything, and then instead, he totally bashed him, did not say his name, but he said, hey, if somebody talks to you and brings up these things, these specific things that my brother had talked to him about, if they bring up these things, they're an intellectual demon, and you shouldn't talk to them. Basically, calling my brother an intellectual demon, and telling people to shun him. And in addition to that, he said that, you know, they wanted me to do research on this stuff that they brought up, but I don't have to do research. You know why? Because I was there. I know that Branham was who he says he was. I know because I saw things, and I don't have to do any research. So talk about going back on your word, and talk about using shunning, shaming tactics, fear tactics for anybody else. So I heard this, and it's terrifying because you're talking about my brother, and now I am believing these things that my brother also believes. So that sermon could have been about me if I had been vocal about what I had believed, what I was discovering. So all of a sudden there's so much fear. I mean, just thinking about it, I'm feeling like sick to my stomach because it's so awful. And if your church ever responds to you in that kind of way, when you ask a question, get out of there. Get out of there right away. That's not a godly church. The disciples of Jesus even had doubts and brought those doubts to Jesus, and Jesus didn't shame them. He calmed their fears and anxieties and explained things the best that that was good for at the time. And some things he said were a mystery to them. But I just want to make that clear to you, because you're allowed to doubt, you're allowed to question, you should be at least. And if your church is not letting you question or responding super negatively to doubts and questions that you have, that's a red flag. It's not the only red flag, but if that is happening, that's not a healthy environment to be in. I'm just telling you right now, you might be in a cult. So yeah, I'm sure not all Branhamism churches would respond like that if you brought up a question. At least, I'd hope that there are, I believe that there are some very good, nice people in those churches who are also just totally brainwashed. So I think that there are some leaders who are kind people who are also brainwashed, and they're not going to shame you if you have doubts, which definitely makes it easier to just live and not be abused, spiritually abused. But yes, so gotta take a deep breath and getting excited again. Very, very passionate about this because it was wrong. What happened was wrong. And so after that, of course, my brother was out of there. I mean, if you can't even ask questions, that I think was just like the nail in the coffin for him. He'd already done all the research, and I think that was just the nail in the coffin. For me, it was different because I was 16 and I was still in my parents' house. And my parents coerced me to continue going Sunday after Sunday, Wednesday after Wednesday. And I will share more about that next week. But I think that we have enough content here for part 4. And let me just say, when I look back on this, I just think, praise God. I am 23 now. That is 7 years. 7 years not believing that anymore. So praise God for that. The next installment in this series where I will share all the backlash, and I will share like the fallout of me discovering that it was a cult, and I'm excited for that. It's a wild ride, but I'm definitely excited to share that with y'all. So stay tuned for that. That's all I got for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Bye.